Hi, I'm Jerry Burnett, and this podcast is going to cover citing sources within your bibliography and your written work. I've created two podcasts in order for you to know how to cite sources properly in your speeches. The first podcast taught how to make a three-part oral citation. This podcast is going to deal with how to put those citations into your written work, whether it's your bibliography page, a full preparation outline, or a speech map. So, regardless of which school you attend, you might be using Beebe and Beebe's textbook, or Grice and Skinner, or Stephen Lucas. Your textbook's going to have a chapter that explains how to gather materials and how to cite your sources. So you also might want to refer to your textbook in addition to this podcast. Anything that is not your intellectual property, if you didn't create it, if you didn't think it up, if you heard it somewhere, saw it somewhere, if it's not your original idea, even if you're paraphrasing or rephrasing, you need to give credit where credit's due. Otherwise, you're plagiarizing. So no matter where you get your information, you're going to need to cite the source. And the way you're going to do it on paper is you're going to have a list of sources called a bibliography. Most of you have taken your English courses and you know what a bibliography is. It's just a list of where you got sources of information that you used for your report. Well, now you're going to use a bibliography page for everything you're citing in your speech. There shouldn't be any entry on your bibliography page unless you are citing something, saying something in your speech, referencing that piece of work or referencing that person. So don't turn in a bibliography with maybe 10 entries and you only cite something from 2 of them. If it's on your bibliography page, I'll be looking in your full prep outline to see what are you saying or showing from that one source of information. Now, I used to, when I first started teaching, I used to tell students you can use MLA or APA, I don't care. Now I care, because I found that people often combined the two or didn't understand the differences. MLA, what is that? That's Modern Language Association. That is the type of citation I'm expecting you to use for your bibliography. APA stands for the American Psychological Association. There's some major differences. For example, APA, they don't use the full first name of the people that you're citing. They only use the first initial. Also, the date of the publication comes immediately after the name. There are some other differences between MLA and APA. Just know that I want you to use MLA. Every instructor you have is going to require their own, have their own requirements. So I'm not saying do all your work in MLA. I'm saying that your work for this course, you should cite your sources in MLA. Now, how are you going to get them into that kind of format? Do I expect you to go and memorize all the rules of MLA? Of course not. You can use easybib.com, citationmachine.com. In fact, Connect Lucas and MyLabs Plus, which are 2 of the publishers' websites that you might be using, they have links right in there to some of these formatting software. You fill in the blanks and you put in as much information as you know. Sometimes you don't know the name of the person that wrote the article. Maybe it's a blog or something online. Maybe it's a website. Or maybe it's in a newspaper and you can quote the newspaper or cite the newspaper, but you don't know the person's name. You give as much information as you know. You might know page numbers, you might not. So it needs to be a thorough and a complete list of all the information that you know for each citation. Your workbook has 2 pages of examples of bibliography. I hope you will maybe stop and pause this podcast and go get your workbook. I'm going to show you those 2 pages on my screen, but it probably would be helpful if you pause the podcast and go get your workbook so that you could look at the 2 pages also. You need to cite each source. Now, sometimes you will have a source on your bibliography page, and maybe you're going to cite it numerous times throughout your speech, or multiple times. The first time, you might say the person's name, like Dr. Helen Steiner explained, and then tell something. Then later in the speech, you might say, Dr. Steiner also said. You can have more than one citation from one source. But if your speech requires to have 2 sources or 6 sources, That means you have to have that many different sources, and you can quote as many things from each source as you choose. Now, on your bibliography page, you don't want any of the information you're giving in your speech. You only give the complete information of the source in an MLA format. Now, I'm now scrolling up, and you can see what one of the works cited pages looks like in your workbook. First of all, in MLA, you will note that it says works cited at the top of the page. It's centered and it says works cited. If it was APA, it would say references, but we're not doing APA. You'll also notice over here, every item starts at the left margin. So each entry will begin at the left margin, and every line after the first is indented. This is called a hanging indent. When you're writing, you usually write in paragraph form. You indent the first line and you don't indent the rest of the lines. But in a bibliography page, you do the opposite. You start at the left margin and then you indent every line thereafter in that entry. That's called a hanging indent, and it supposedly looks a little bit like the state of Oklahoma. So you put them all in alphabetical order, and you use the MLA format that you found either in Citation Machine or easybib.com. You make it complete. I will know if you've used the academic databases because it will be part of your citation. Now, you don't give the academic database name in the oral part of your speech, but you do list it here. And as you can see here, right here it says this is EBCO host, and right here you can see, I can see what database you've used. There's another database lower on the page. Here's another one, Ohio Link. I'm always going to be looking to see at least one of your sources came from the electronic databases from your electronic library at your institution. Now, the list on this page is single-spaced. I don't care if you single-space or double-space. Often your teachers want strictly MLA and they want it double-spaced. But you'll notice that if you're going to single-space your entries, you're going to double-space between the entries. But every entry still starts at the left margin, and every line after the first is indented. If you double space your entries, which is what you can now see on the screen, double spacing the entries means that you double space throughout. You don't add an extra double space between the entries. But every entry is in alphabetical order. It starts at the left margin, and you have them all using the hanging indent. I've shown you here a bibliography. I want to show you how to quickly and easily format your document. A lot of times you'll be copying some information from one of the databases, and when they copy in, this one shows it's an Arial font. The one below it, this is in a Times Roman font. This one's another kind of font. When you copy and paste them into your bibliography page, a lot of times they're in a variety of fonts. So here's how you can get it all matching quickly. First of all, never name your document bibliography. An MLA bibliography is always called works cited. So get the right title, centered. Then, if you will highlight all of the entries that you're making, and I've only got 4 here, but I highlight them all. And if you go up, you now can turn them all into the same font. You choose the font, whether you want it to be Times Roman, Arial, or whatever. I'll pick a Calibri font, and I also want it to be a 12-point font, because all your work is to be in 12 points. Okay, so now I have it all at least in the same font, but they are not hanging indents. Here's how you easily get your works cited into a hanging indent. You highlight all your citations. There they are. Then you go up here on the ruler, and do you see on the ruler you have 2 carets, one's down and one's up. You take the bottom caret and you bring it over to 1/2 inch. Then you bring the top caret back to the left margin, and voila, you now have hanging indents for each one. Now this is all double spaced, and it has 2 spaces in between. Remember I said if you're double spacing, you want to take out the double spaces in between. If you're single spacing, you do want to double space between the items. But I can easily count how many sources you have, because all I'm going to do is start at the left margin and go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and count how many you have. So let's review. I want your bibliography page to be proper, all the citations complete in MLA format, and at least one should be from an academic database. The title should say Works Cited. You should have one font style throughout the bibliography page, and use hanging indents. That means each one looks like the state of Oklahoma. You can double space or single space, I don't care which, and make sure your list is alphabetized. Now, when you're doing your oral citations in your typed documents, such as your outline, speech maps, I want you to write it exactly as you plan to say it. You're going to give the source first, and this isn't the whole source that was in your bibliography page, just the name or the name and the date or the name of the qualifiers. Then a verb that you've picked and the information. You're going to surround your sources by the word cite, C-I-T-E, before and after your oral citation. This is in your full preparation outline or your speech map or in any other kind of place that you're typing your works cited. Your oral citation should be exactly as you plan to say it. Don't include www. But give the source plus the name of the person, a verb, and the data. Your workbook shows perfect examples of what these should look like. Go to the page in your workbook that shows a full prep outline, and you'll see 2 citations surrounded. They're bold and they're surrounded by the word cite. There's also a speech map in your workbook. It shows an oral citation. You type the oral citation exactly as you plan to say it. Now this might be from research, it might be from quotes, it's like McDonald's says, "I'm loving it." Even if it's a brief quote from somebody, I want to hear McDonald's first and then the citation. Don't forget, even if you're showing graphics, charts, or other kind of using sound, cite all your sources orally on your bibliography page and be sure and get all the information as needed.